Hello and welcome. My name is Aisha, and today we celebrate the launch of the Digital Talking Objects Archive, a project that has brought together teams from Germany, Kenya, and Senegal over the past 3 years. But what exactly is the Talking Objects Archive? It's not just a collection of objects, it's a platform that rethinks how we share, preserve, and produce knowledge. It challenges colonial narratives and invites us to look at history and heritage from different perspectives. This archive has been shaped by the Talking Objects Lab, where we've explored decolonial knowledge production through over 50 events, artistic symposia, exhibitions, talks, podcasts, readings, food gatherings, and performances. Together, these moments allowed us to engage with thinkers, artists, curators, cooks, and many more incredible voices. Everything that happened in the lab has contributed to what you see today. A growing archive that reflects polyperspectivity, diversity, and creativity. We hope this archive will continue to grow with your contributions, opening new spaces for stories and knowledge. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate this exciting digital launch. Nous commençons cette célébration avec un prélude musical. En mai 2023, un événement unique a eu lieu au musée Théodore Monod à Dakar. Talking to Objects. Les objets du musée ont été déplacés dans le jardin et le public a été invité à engager un dialogue direct avec eux. Cet événement a inspiré le musicien Alibeta, qui a enregistré une communication musicale avec ces objets. À travers la musique, il donne vie aux histoires silencieuses qu'il porte. Écoutons maintenant cette œuvre musicale, une rencontre entre le passé et le présent, la mémoire et l'imagination.
Janja korkumba nak nawle fada bonaroge Janja korkumba nak nawle fada bonaroge Janja korkumba nak nawle fada naroge Janja korkumba nak nawle fada bonaroge 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 Janja korkumba nak nawle fada bonarogo Janja korkumba nak nawle fada bonaroge 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 bonaroge, nyanja korkumbaye, bonaroge, nyanja korkumbaye, bonaroge, nyanja korkumbaye, bonaroge, silmanga mayanga yanga yanga bonaroge, rogoro rogelise sinaye, bonaroge, silmanga bonaroge, rogoro rogelise bonaroge, simamaro fakutulele bonaroge, simimbatan fajimudane bonaroge, simamaro fakutulele bonaroge, simamaro konimatane.
The Talking Objects Archive would not exist without the vision and dedication of its curators. A team of brilliant minds consisting of Chao Tayiana Maina, Isabel Rabe, Marit Makupka, and Malik Ndiaye have worked together to shape this archive, bringing in their own perspectives and expertise. I had the honor to sit down with them earlier this month, and they told me more about their ideas, the challenges they faced, and the hopes they have for the future of this project. Let's listen to our conversation now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session with the curatorial team of the Talking Objects Archive. This archive rethinks how we produce and share knowledge by centering decolonial practice and collaboration. And let's get to know a bit more about that. And I'm joined by 4 brilliant curators who have been key to shaping this project. Welcome here, Isabel Rabe. She's the initiator of the Talking Objects project, also a curator and cultural producer based in Berlin. Marit Makupka, she's a curator at the Museum Angewandte Kunst in Frankfurt, where she focuses on decolonial cultural practices. Also here is El Hadji Malik Ndiaye, curator of the Theodore Monod Museum in Dakar and a researcher at IFAN. Also here is Chao Tayiana Maina, founder of African Digital Heritage, applying digital technologies to cultural preservation and restitution. So let's get to know more background about this wonderful project. Isabel, you had the idea for this project. Could you tell us a bit more how this Talking Objects Archive came about? And what's your inspiration for decolonizing knowledge?
Thank you, Aisha, for the question. Hello, everybody. In 2020, I came up with the idea for the Talking Objects project, which is basically about decolonizing knowledge. And then the first thing I did was I wrote an email to Marit, whose work I was following and appreciating already. And she was enthusiastic from the very beginning. So what we did was we developed together this artistic research project called Talking Objects Lab, which is led by this wonderful, brilliant curatorial team you see here from Dakar, from Nairobi, from Frankfurt and Berlin. Until last year, Jockey Gumi from the Nest Collective in Nairobi was part of the group as well. So we are interested in other forms of knowledge, in plural knowledge and polyperspectivity, with a focus on the African continent, with knowledge that breaks with the Eurocentric perspectives. And the range of topics we addressed was very wide. For example, what is knowledge today? So what can knowledge be? How can we break the hierarchies of knowledge? What is memory? What is commemorated? Commemorary culture? Where is memory stored? We talked about nature, anti-colonial approaches to nature, dichotomy, human beings, nature, food and its colonial entanglements, but also about restitution. Just shortly after the Benin bronzes were restituted, we had an event in Lagos, which discussed what happens after the objects returned from an African perspective. We discussed about African studies, European Black studies, Afro-American studies. We always put a focus on artistic perspectives and reflections. And all this work enabled, accompanied, and nourished the development of the Talking Objects Archive, which is we call it a digital platform for decolonial knowledge production. And what we did is, starting from a collection of objects, we use them as door openers in like our universe of plural knowledge and invite the visitors to explore that with us.
Thank you so much, Isabelle. It all started with a collection. Et Malik, merci beaucoup d'être là. Tu es le conservateur du musée Théodore Monod à Dakar et la collection du Talking Objects Archive a commencé avec des objets de ton musée. Donc, comment fais-tu pour faire parler ces objets dans le cadre d'un projet décolonial qui a été initialisé en Europe, un projet comme celui-ci?
Merci beaucoup. Quand Isabelle et Marit sont venus me voir, j'ai trouvé que le projet était intéressant et j'ai trouvé aussi qu'il y avait beaucoup de similitudes avec les programmes sur lesquels nous étions à l'époque parce qu'il y avait deux axes. Nous étions sur un programme comment dire, de résidence artistique qui consistait à inviter des artistes au musée pour dialoguer avec les collections. D'une certaine manière, ces artistes faisaient parler nos objets parce qu'ils réinterprétaient les objets, ils apposaient une nouvelle analyse afin de pouvoir augmenter leur capacité, disons, subliminale. Et ça, c'était intéressant puisque ces objets sont enfouis dans des archives et dans une histoire coloniale. Et pour cette raison, il fallait quand même les secouer. Et j'ai trouvé que les artistes avaient cette capacité de, d'ouvrir des nouvelles brèches et de faire de sorte que ces objets puissent avoir une nouvelle dimension de lecture dans notre société contemporaine, donc puissent parler à la société, puissent intéresser et soulever de nouveaux enjeux. L'autre axe que je trouvais commun et sur lequel nous étions d'ailleurs, c'était que on faisait tout pour une décolonisation des musées. Donc, la décolonisation des musées, pour nous, impliquait plusieurs dispositifs, la monstration, la scénographie, l'interprétation des objets, les thématiques des expositions, mais surtout une recherche qui avait pour dimension d'explorer les savoirs endogènes des sociétés parce que nous considérons que les masques, les objets, les statues, toutes les collections que nous avons ne sont pas seulement esthétiques, mais ont aussi une dimension intellectuelle, donc une dimension liée au savoir, au savoir-faire. Donc, au moins pour ces deux raisons, j'ai été très séduit par le projet et c'est la raison pour laquelle, puisque notre musée a une dimension expérimentale, en fait, c'est plutôt la dimension que nous voulons lui donner. Cette dimension expérimentale, on s'est dit, on va faire de ce musée un laboratoire d'idées, de tentatives, d'expériences et au sein de ce projet.
Merci beaucoup. Let's move on to Marit. So Malik was talking about shaking up objects, adding perspectives and conversations to them. So your work focuses on memory culture and decolonial practices. And how does this idea of getting objects to talk connect to your work there as a curator? And how did you approach selecting objects from the collection for this archive?
Thank you, Aisha, for introduction and your question. And maybe I should talk a little about the idea to include the Museum Angewandte Kunst as a museum for applied arts into this whole research on and conversation, because it may seem quite unusual to have like this institution that seems to be really rooted in the European idea of a museum and treating objects and collecting objects. And in my work, I constantly question hierarchies and also these divisions between institutions and also the categories into which they put objects. And so decolonizing knowledge in that context, for me, I would say, means mainly opening up perspectives and opening the space to have diverse conversations about objects, but also with the objects, to really break with this Eurocentric perspective on researching and treating objects and including more diverse voices into the dialogue, so that this misconception or this idea about like, okay, we have this European museum with this European collection, which has nothing to do with objects from other parts of the world or other cultural contexts. So to open this up and also bring it into dialogue with an approach that might be had in the museum, like the Musée Théodore Monod, which also deals with everyday objects from people. So there is like this kind of parallel between this kind of museum in Dakar and a museum for applied arts in a European country like Germany, because usually it is not said that we have like an ethnological perspective on objects, but what actually is an ethnological perspective. So I'm questioning this in my work, and so it seems like very logical and natural to include a museum like the Museum Angewandte Kunst, the Museum for Applied Arts, into this conversation and this idea, this question of treating and discussing objects and also like getting in dialogue with objects.
Thank you for telling us more about, who needs to actually be brought into dialogue with who, and I think you're really broadening the landscape here. So, Chao, as a founder of African Digital Heritage, you've been, of course, deeply involved in this digital framework. So what role did African Digital Heritage play in shaping this archive? And what do you think makes this archive unique compared to others?
Thank you for the question, Aisha. To begin with, I will say that African Digital Heritage really was asking the question, what does it mean to build the digital infrastructure that mirrors the perspectives, the needs, and everything that had emerged from the Talking Objects Lab? Now, oftentimes, like, we build technology because we assume that a certain problem needs to be solved. And so the problem fits into the technology. But in this case, we were addressing the problem, addressing the gap that we were seeing, and then trying to build the platform to match this gap. And so African Digital Heritage came in primarily to say, how do you translate this into a website, into a platform, and make sure that the platform captures these very same dynamics. And so for the past year, my team and I have been working to curate and to design the platform, and to ask ourselves, how do these principles of plurality, of polyperspectivity, of play, how are they captured online, and it's very interesting, I think, to see what happens when you're trying to move from theory to practice, and what is lost, but also what is gained, what the limitations of the technology are, what possibilities are opened, and I think one thing that has emerged for us is that you really can't separate the process and the context people are working in from the technology itself. And so in as much as we are building this platform and we are building this archive to mirror the decolonial methodologies, to mirror the decolonial perspectives, we are still trying to understand what does it mean to have a decolonial process when we are working together, when we are coding, when we are trying to upload data. And so the past year or so has really been wonderful and challenging, showing that it's not exactly a one-to-one process, But I think that the space of innovation and the spirit of innovation, forces and calls us to ask, what can we do better? What can we do next?
Thank you so much, Charles. What can we do better? What can we do next? Talking to objects is an ongoing conversation, I believe, from what I hear from all of you. So as the initiator of the project, Isabel, you've seen it grown from an idea, writing an email to Marit, to really reality. What do you hope for the archive's future, and how Chao talked about the process, so how can it continue to evolve as a platform for decolonial knowledge production, in your opinion?
Well, in our work, we are always very, very interested in the process. So for me, these years from 2020 to now are as important and as much the result than the digital archive itself. And we keep on learning. So from one result leads to the next question, to the next challenge, to the next step. And the good thing with digital archives are they're never finalized, right? They can grow, they are supposed to grow and develop further. And we come up now with our idea of plural knowledge on a digital platform. And in a second step, we now want, because it's an archive for people, that's what you always emphasize, Chao. It's an archive for the people, so we want people to be involved. So the second chapter, let's say, for talking objects is definitely about participation. We come out now. There are still many gaps. There are still many questions. There's still so much to explore, and we will invite people to help us develop this digital archive by open calls for artists to participate, for academics, but also for just everyone who is interested, young people, going to the communities, talk about keep on this conversation with and about objects in the future.
Thank you, Marit. How do you reflect on your experience with this project, and how do we need to continue this conversation, in your opinion?
Maybe I also talk a little bit about like the selection process for the archive, because I think that this is maybe also an approach that can be carried on into the future in the archive, and also in inviting users to also engage in the process. And when I selected the objects from the museum's collection, I worked very closely with the core collection from the Musée Théodore Monod and was looking for topics and themes that I saw like a focus on. And then I was looking for parallels in the Museum Angewandtes Kunst collection, and there was like maybe this idea of like spiritual objects. And then there was a question, what can a spiritual object from the museum's collection be? And we have like a lot of objects that are connected to the Christian religion. And so I would like also like encourage people to look for specific forms of dialogue between objects from the core collection, maybe from the Musée Théodore Monod, and like all the other collections who have like a quite similar approach or quite similar idea of an object. And then the Museum Angewandte Kunst comes with seemingly another approach to the object, but then there are obvious parallels. And so I would like encourage users more and more to also look for maybe a connection over materiality that is not so obvious maybe in the beginning, but then see, okay, there is like a comparable approach in craftsmanship, for example. And then there was this whole topic of gendered objects that I saw, that there were like stools specifically made for women, and there was like bags specifically made for like a bachelor. It was At least it was how it was described in the object's description, and these were like paths that led me into the research of the Museum Angewandtes Kunst collection to look for similar objects that may be gendered in their description as well. And so this would be my idea or my approach also, how connections and relations and dialogues between objects can be carried out in future. And this is definitely something I would encourage in this archival process.
Thank you so much, Marit. Malik, quel a été l'impact sur ton travail au musée Théodore Monod par le projet Talking Objects?
Le projet Talking Object a été une plus-value pour le musée Théodore Monod parce que nous sommes en partenariat avec plusieurs institutions, plusieurs groupes de recherche, des associations et d'autres musées. Mais particulièrement avec Talking Object, cela a été une expérience qui introduisait quelque chose d'alternatif. Parce que la manière dont ces partenariats peuvent avoir lieu est diverse et variée. Mais Talking Object nous permettait de mixer des résidences d'artistes, d'aller loin dans l'expérimentation, de discuter de ces expérimentations avec les artistes lors des restitutions et surtout de faire du travail de la recherche appliquée. C'est-à-dire que quand un artiste vient et explore les collections, c'est l'occasion pour lui de rester longtemps au musée, d'entrer dans les réserves, d'aller parfois dans les archives et d'échanger avec la communauté, donc d'échanger avec les agents du musée. Donc, institutionnellement, Talking Object est quelque chose qui a fait bouger les choses dans le sens que nous voulons, puisque nous étions aussi dans cette orientation. De ce point de vue, c'est également une expérience positive dans la mesure où, à chaque fois qu'on faisait des restitutions d'artistes, on a profité pour créer un débat avec la communauté. Parce que on avait des personnes qu'on invitait qui venaient au musée et on allait loin dans l'expérimentation. Par exemple, la dernière exposition que nous avons organisée au musée, pour la première fois, nous avons non seulement fait une performance avec les objets, ce que nous avons toujours fait, mais pour la première fois, les objets étaient sortis et mis dans la cour du musée, ce qui d'habitude ne se fait pas. Mais puisque nous ne sommes pas un musée orthodoxe et qu'on s'est placé dans l'axe dans l'axe expérimental, il nous fallait aller jusqu'au bout et cela a été une sacrée expérience. Donc, dans l'ensemble, c'est une plus-value, c'est un avantage et c'est critique et c'est ce qui nous permet d'avancer.
Merci beaucoup. Chao, my last question to you. You're bridging technology and heritage preservation, and from your perspective, how can digital tools like this, archives, platforms, continue this conversation we have about restitution, about access to knowledge, to cultural heritage?
I think digital tools are very central in how we consume knowledge today, how we access knowledge, how we share knowledge, and I think we can no longer look at digital platforms as the way in which we are interacting with our world. For restitution, for reclamation of heritage, I think the first thing is an awareness, and a shift. I think so much is enabled and activated when people know, when people have access to this material, to these objects. And we are also kind of challenging the idea of creating digital basements, and moving things from one museum basement to a hard drive. And therefore, the thing that makes this work worthwhile is not just building the technology and having it sit there, but having people use it, having people engage with it, having people critique it, having people test it. And I think for African restitution in particular, it's also a question about what the technology enables us to challenge in terms of how our knowledge is presented, who keeps it, who hosts it, who stores it. And so it's not just a question of accessing, but also I think questioning and understanding and revealing the politics of access as well. So awareness, activism, engagement, imagination, I think those are all things that the technology enables, but that has to be an intentional decision. The technology does not do that. It's not sentient to wake up and say, I want this to be what people do with me. It's, those of us who are building the technologies, who are envisioning it, who have to make that a priority.
Thank you so much, Chao. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Marit. Thank you, Malik and Chao for this inspiring conversation, also for your work with this Talking Objects archive. I think it's a powerful example on how collaboration and new pathways for knowledge production can be created. So thank you so much. And yes, thanks everyone for watching as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This archive was made possible due to the incredible support of our sponsors and partners. We extend our gratitude to the Federal Commissioner for Culture and Media, the KfW Stiftung, the Goethe-Institut, the Federal Foreign Office, as well as the Heinrich Böll Stiftung. Special thanks also goes to the teams in Kenya, Senegal, and Germany, especially African Digital Heritage, whose hard work made this archive reality. And of course, we thank the more than 140 artists, thinkers, and activists who have contributed to the Talking Objects Lab over the years. Now, we'll hear welcome messages from two of our main sponsors, Claudia Roth, who is the Federal Commissioner for Culture and Media, and Rose Field from the KfW Stiftung. They will both also share some favorite items from the archive with us. Let's see what they have to tell us.
Welcome to the website of the Talking Objects Archive. My name is Claudia Roth. I am the Federal Government Commissioner for Culture and the Media of the Federal Republic of Germany. Addressing the legacy of Germany's colonial past is very important to me. That is why my office has funded many projects over the years which are dedicated to this effort. One of these wonderful projects is the Talking Objects Archive. I am delighted to present a very special object from this archive. This ancestral figure was made by members of the Luba people in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This object is currently in the collection of the Grassi Museum of Ethnology in Leipzig. The figure is evidence of the important role of women in Luba society as providers of life and nourishment and as spiritual mediators between this life and the afterlife. This object was used in ritual ceremonies in order to remain in touch with one's ancestors. The standing figure displays the typical scarification on its belly and has crisscrossed braids on its head. This object creates an intriguing link between a pre-colonial understanding of gender and today's Afrofeminism. These themes also resonate elsewhere in the Talking Objects Archive. I thank the team behind the Talking Objects Archive for this exciting project and the important ideas it inspires.
Hello and welcome to the digital launch of the Talking Objects Archive. On behalf of KfW Stiftung, I'm happy to join in launching the culmination of the amazing work that has been done by the Talking Objects team. As an independent non-profit foundation, KfW Stiftung works with partner organizations to create platforms for international contemporary arts and culture. With a focus on strengthening creativity, freedom of expression and discursive capacity, and promoting cultural diversity, we are happy to have been part of the Talking Objects project since 2023. Alongside supporting the Talking Objects Archive, KfW Stiftung collaborated with Talking Objects to conceptualize and realize think tanks at the Musée Théodore Monod in Dakar on the topic of feminist knowledge production, and at the Villa 102 and Museum Angewandte Kunst in Frankfurt am Main on the cosmologies of objects. In addition, an exhibition featuring artworks by Elise Fit-Duvail, Caritha Karimi, and Anna Yahweh accompanied the think tank in Frankfurt am Main. The outcomes of these think tanks can be found interspersed throughout the Talking Objects website and included in the archive itself. For my object, I have chosen the dip dish Reproduction and Charm by Elise Fit-Duvail. During her residency at the Musée Théodore Monod in Dakar, Senegal, Fit-Duvail worked with everyday artifacts from the Manding Kingdom. Known for the narrative form of her works, it is fitting that for these pieces, the artist focused on the founding myth of the kingdom, and specifically on the story of the mother figure, Sogolan. We see a charm for protection collaged into photos of the streets of Dakar. The other half of the artwork is a photograph of a female body that mirrors the form of the object, taking on an assumed protective stance. By placing the object and the body next to each other and connecting them to the myth of the Manding Kingdom, Fit-Duvail points to the connotations of the object, both in form and spiritual meaning. Protection in the form of a charm, protection in the form of a position, protection in the form of a mother. Thank you very much for joining us today. I welcome you all to peruse the archive with us and discover how the objects talk and what they have to say.
Objects in museums carry stories of creation, displacement, and resilience. The artist Nando Nkrumah has explored these themes through a stool from Kenya that is currently held in the Rautenstrauch Joost Museum in Cologne. Using stop-motion animation, clay, and poetry, he created a work called Like Water. Water, as Nando says, is a symbol of life and collective action. Let's take a look at his incredible video work.
Growth, circle by circle, born within the circle. Rest, authority, community. Violence, pain, suffering, the deconstruction of self-determination, day after day, year after year, century after century. Children of the motherland, be like water. Children of the diaspora, be like water. Children of today and tomorrow, be like life-giving, restoring, healing water. Not separated from nature, the roots grow deep if we are like water. Now.
Finalement, le moment est venu. Nous sommes très fiers et très heureux de vous présenter le nouveau site web. La prochaine étape de notre programme nous conduit au cœur des archives numériques. Le site web du Talking Objects Archive a été conçu pour refléter l'histoire de la polyperspectivité. Il donne accès à des histoires, des objets et des savoirs sous différents angles. Chao Tayiana Maina, fondatrice de l'initiative African Digital Heritage, va nous guider à travers cette plateforme innovante. Découvrons ensemble ce site.
Kumba, 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 kumba.
This archive is built on three principles, what we are calling the 3 Ps. The first one is plurality, second is play, and third is polyperspectivity. Now, when you land on the homepage of the Talking Objects Archive, you are met with this beautiful home and title screen that really One gives you the fundamental principle on which this archive is built. But secondly, you are also presented with a random array of material in the background. Now, this was very intentional for us because we asked ourselves, what if someone doesn't know what they're looking for? Or what if you just want to explore, And so here the concept of play comes out very, very strongly. These objects behind here are selected at random, which means whenever you land on the website, you're always going to be presented with something different. And if you are interested in diving into it further, you will just need to click on an object. And in this ways, you can be able to understand more about its particular context, its relation, and any media and forms of media that are attached to it. So that's the first way of encountering information through the site by randomly clicking something on the homepage. Now, this item might appeal to you because of its title, because of its image, and really, we did not want to curtail or just stifle the ways in which people interact with items. The second principle upon which this archive is built is plurality. This plurality is captured through the structuring of information in themes, sub-themes, and multiple categories. And this is the main entry point is this menu bar that you have over here. Information on the website, on the archive, is categorized into 5 main themes. And within each of these themes, you have sub-themes, and within the sub-themes, you have categories. And so this really speaks to the ways in which items on the website are structured, but also that items can belong to multiple categories. So here you have the theme of identity, and you also have sub-themes that are connected to this theme of identity. We've also broken down the ways in which we understand these themes, so if you're thinking, but what do we mean by colonial violence? We have broken this down through this text just below the sub-themes. What do we mean by Afrofeminism? Afrofeminism, we have also broken that down. And so this applies to all themes on the website, as well as all categories. And this particular section changes according to the theme or the sub-theme that you have clicked. And so that's the second way of entering and understanding how information is structured on this website. The third way is through polyperspectivity, which is really connected to the question in the theme of plurality and play. And this is combining 2 things, play and intention. So in this context, you are able to shuffle the die and understand how themes, for example, you're only interested in oral history, or you're also interested in African cities. You're able to dive into the archive according to this particular sub-theme. And so upon entry to the archive, you can navigate into different knowledge items, into different objects. And I think it's very important to say that when we speak of objects in this archive, we do not speak of objects in a traditional sense of a material artifact. Rather, we look at objects as representations of knowledge. And so this can be videos, it can be text, it can be images, it can be music, and so on. Under each object, you're also able to understand the relation, and so how this object relates to other materials in the archive. And so this concept of polyperspectivity and plurality is mirrored not just in terms of how you enter the archive and how you access it, but also in terms of how you see different objects in relation to each other. And so we invite you to use this website to deconstruct it, to play, to explore, to get lost, to find new things, to find old things, and really just to understand and relate to information in a different way. Aside from exploring the objects themselves, we have also included a large corpus of resources on how we built this archive. There's a manifesto that has guided the production of this digital infrastructure. There's a glossary that explains the terms that we have used. And there is also a way of understanding, if you're interested in the specifics of the technicalities of how the infrastructure was built, that is also available. Finally, we also have a section that we are very excited about, and this is called the playground. The playground is really dedicated to understanding how individuals can present items that mean or relate to a story they're trying to tell. So this is a curated section in which members of our community can find different items, can find different objects on the archive and weave together a narrative that speaks to them and speaks to a thematic that they're trying to bring about. Basically, how do you tell a story through these items? And in this way, the playground really serves as a primary platform and entry point into combining storytelling, curation, and exploration. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for witnessing and joining us in this dream. This is not a final product, and we hope to continue building it as we move along. But we really, really do sincerely hope that we can explore this archive together and that you can send us your feedback on what worked, what didn't work, and this can be a living archive. Thank you.
Creating a digital archive that connects continents requires teamwork, creativity, and a shared vision. The digital team worked together to bring this archive to life. I sat down with members of them, Mutano Kianya, Muthoni Mwangi, Janzaki Zabandi, and Danielle Rosales, and I spoke with them about their experiences and challenges of building this platform. Let's now hear what they have to say. Hello and welcome to this session. Today we're diving into the transcontinental cooperation that brought the Talking Objects Archive to life. Because the archive is not just about collecting knowledge, it's about challenging colonial frameworks, centering diverse perspectives, and creating space for dialogues across continents. So join me today with the four incredible contributors who played key roles in shaping this project. I have here with us today Danielle from Berlin. She is the co-founder of Visual Intelligence, worked on developing the archive's visual identity using decolonial design strategies. Also here with us today is Muthoni from Nairobi, a research associate and curator at African Digital Heritage. She co-authored the Talking Objects Manifesto and contributed to the conceptualization of the archive. Then we also have here Mutano. She is also from Nairobi, head of programs and outreach at African Digital Heritage, and she led the team in curation and design thinking to shape the archive's vision. Also with us is Jeanne. She is part of the project coordination team based in Frankfurt and Berlin. She managed partnerships with museums, organized artist residencies, and ensured artist care. So welcome to all of you and thank you for being here. So our spectators get a better idea of your roles, you can explain to us maybe one by one, what was your role in the Talking Objects Archive and how did this project's decolonial vision shape the way you approached your work? Maybe we can start with what we see. Danielle.
Yes, so Visual Intelligence had been working together with the Talking Objects lab, and for quite some time we developed also the visual language for the lab, and then continued working on how the visuality of an archive could look like. Before, or in the introduction, you talked about decolonial design strategies, and I mean, we don't have the time for this, and I'm going to make it very short, but in general, this does not even exist, right? So, but what we started already with the lab and try to continue with the archive is to find visual strategies that actually correspond to the content. Like, how can you work or how can you visualize and represent the complexities of objects and also archives and knowledge systems, basically. And this was more or less our work together with Robin Kuhn and from Visual Intelligence, and also Dine. We worked on this on a technical perspective, but also especially on the visual perspective.
Thank you. Yes, unfortunately, we cannot hear more about this, but I think the archive and the visuals of it speak for itself. So let's move on to you, Mutoni. Maybe you can tell us more about your role in the archive and about your approach and what perspectives you brought in.
Hello, everyone. I am Modoni. As part of the ADH team, we have been doing the content upload, content organization, curation on the website, making the decisions on what it would look like, how to categorize all this information that we have. We have footage and images from 3 years of Talking Objects labs, as well as from 5 museums. So how do we present this information in a playful manner? How do we present it in a way that's accessible to our audiences? And then on top of that, I co-authored the manifesto. I can say I am not the same person who wrote that manifesto, both with joy and with some grief. But so taking part in just dreaming the archive into being, or writing down the dreams we had for this archive. That's been my role.
Thank you so much. That sounds so visionary. I think dreaming is important, something we don't do enough. Thank you so much. Mutanu, you're also part of the African Digital Heritage team. So what exactly was your role, and how did you approach this joint project?
As Mudhani mentioned, we got into this project as part of the curatorial leads. So what that meant was bringing these conversations that had happened for over 3 years, so conversations and exhibitions, and trying to imagine how we would put this on a digital platform in a way that is, one, inviting to audiences, but two, allowing them to also think about the colonial frameworks of presentation of knowledges. And so what we did was kind of try to imagine what goes where, and how do we then also center knowledges that are based from like the central archive, which was 50 collections from Museum Theodore. You could look at it from the website, and then make sure that these objects then speak to each other, which was basically the common denominator of the project, Talking Objects.
Thank you so much. That's very interesting. And now to you, Jeanne. We heard a lot about imagination, but it's also, I think, a really tough job to help to get imagination come to life. And that's in a framework across continents. So maybe you can tell us more about this big word called coordination. What was your role?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe first of all, I think which is also interesting about this project in general is that, for example, as Danielle said, she was part of it or was thinking with talking objects from the very beginning, whilst I joined, I think, in the end of last year. So, and I think that's how the project in general was like evolving. Coordination is a big word, that's true, but to make it maybe a bit more concrete, another thing that is speaking for this project in general is like this really transdisciplinary and also transcontinental way of working. So I think there are like a lot of different people working on one project. I think maybe everyone has slightly different understandings of what this archive should be, or has like maybe another starting point or entry point. So I think my work was mainly about like making sure that in the end we are still working for the same thing. So bringing together the museums together with the artists, with those who are more concerned with the technical questions and so on. So yeah, you can think of a lot of people working on this, and then there need to be some people who are making sure that everything is kind of flowing.
Yes, making sure that everything is flowing is important. And I believe that could be very, very challenging in different time zones, different schedules, different perspectives. So cheers to you, Jean, for holding everything together so well. So let's get back on the dream thing, but also let's combine it with a reality check. So maybe you can tell us what, an initial dream. You've already talked a bit about it, especially Mutoni and Mutanu, but maybe you can tell us what an initial dream was, thinking about this decolonial context and project. And but what was a reality check lesson that you also took from this project? Maybe you want to start, Mutano. You seem like something comes to your mind already.
I guess when we started the project, the greatest dream was an archive that will break us from the shackles of decolonial thinking, and that will invite periphery communities to platform their conversations, their realities, and try and think of how do they platform their knowledges in a way that centers them and centers their realities, centers what they hold dear, as opposed to this great archive that is the internet that doesn't center them. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is that with every decolonial project, you will find that your first intuition is to think around what you have been taught to think around when building or when thinking about things, which for very many of us is colonial. So every thought, every decision, most of us, including the team that is African Digital Heritage, Visual Intelligence, the museums involved, had to sit with the content, had to sit with the objects they gave out to think, okay, is how do we present this? Is how we are presenting this colonial or not? And what are the alternative ways of getting out of this thinking? And that to me was one of the greatest, pleasures of the project, but also I think it allowed us to sit back and question ourselves, what really is this decolonial that we keep speaking about? And I hope that the audiences who get to interact with the archive get to also see some of these alternate ways of presenting knowledges that we had to question as we were getting through the build.
Thank you so much. It reminds me of conversations we've had before. I think we are always coming to that point and I think it just, shows how self-aware people are that work also in the decolonial context, very strict, deconstructing it bit by bit, but I think it's the work that we have to do, and it's very complex. So Danielle, what do you think? What was a design decolonial dream you had, and what was a lesson you've learned in the project? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I totally forgot. Yeah, there are several dreams or hopes that we could achieve. One thing that we have been working on for a long time, or what we, what is always like our wish is to get in a visual complexity, meaning also to kind of like deconstruct or at least re-question the way how we read information, how we perceive it, how we can display it, what kind of different ways. And there's a lot of playing around, right? And a lot of improvising also. But then you're confronted, and then that's the reality with accessibility measurements. You are also confronted with technical restrictions and barriers, of course. And then also, how much can you do, but how much is actually necessary, and what does it really solve, or does it even create more problems, and so on. And also, what Mutano said, like about what is this decolonial reading at this point, né? And how much do we actually achieve if we raise up the complexity like super much and question everything and deconstruct everything? What are the outcomes? And are we actually solving a problem, or are we creating much more? And so there's like a thin line on where you can really question and or deconstruct in many ways, but then also where you're getting so like kind of like so inaccessible that your work becomes like not readable at all, right? So this was one of the things where we always had to try out and then, check again, of course, also with all the others and the other perspectives also, and the other ways of reading, and then, try again and try again. This was actually, this is like a long process, but it's actually for me personally, one of the most fruitful ones, because you just try and error. And you just, you make mistakes, you do it again and again, and then you criticize, sometimes you discuss a lot. I just remember the workshops that we had. Sometimes I was like, oh my God, are we ever going to find any kind of solution? But then at the end, we did find a solution, because it really comes like, all the different perspectives really merge into something, and just takes a long, long way. And I'm kind of happy like how it turned out right now, even though I still think we're still in experimenting mode, right? And still checking and seeing what is working, what is not. And I think this is one of the decolonial practices, is to say like, we don't know. Mm-hmm. This is not final. Knowledge systems, if they are like diverse and complex, means actually that they are never, finished, or that there's not this one truth, or there are just several. So I don't know if I answered the question fully, because there's so many things I could say.
And then you also shared many insights of the work and what it means to really, if you take it serious, because decolonial concept has become such a buzzword. And like you said, really doing the job means deconstructing, means also challenging your own thought. It's not about, putting colonial structures into others and saying we're the one that's decolonial. It's about really reflecting it in every step. So that's really amazing. But what I love about the project is that it's digital. So I think things can change, things can be adapted, new thoughts, new perspectives can dive in. But we also see the results, and I see that you really put a lot of work and thought and discussions to it. Decisions that you had to coordinate Jeanne. So maybe what are your thoughts on it? Because I believe this project is a joint project, but then it is also located in Germany, which is also, kind of brings in a certain framework. So what are your thoughts on these? What were your dreams coordinating such a project from Germany, and what were lessons that you've learned?
Yes, I think it's an interesting question to ask, like, what were the dreams we've been starting with, or we had when we entered this project? Because I think for me it was maybe a little bit the other way around, because I started it and I remember that I was talking to friends and I was like, this kind of feels like a mission impossible, bringing together archival practice, but also decolonial knowledge production. And I mean, maybe I don't even have to explain it why I was thinking it's a mission impossible, but just like thinking about an archive, like the traditional archive is mainly about like collecting knowledge so that you can build up like identity for, let's say, the nation state, for example. So it has this like very, very crucial, it's a very important tool in this context, for example. Or also that archives always have like a certain structure, which is also bringing hierarchy and so on. And decolonial knowledge production is about like breaking with all of that. So I was wondering, okay, how can we do it? And it became quite obvious that the term of archival practice has to be enlarged a little bit. And maybe just one thing that was also already mentioned is the fact of archiving, but also allow multiple truths to be true, multiple narrations to just like stand next to each other. And I think that's something you can kind of easily say it like this, but when it comes about the concrete, when it comes, for example, about like text production, like how do we actually define what is decolonial? How do we define what is identity? There were like really, really interesting moments when we all were like, especially together with ADH, discussing certain terms that we also brought to a glossary, because we realized we are using a language which is like very, very natural to us. But when it comes about like really, really defining what we mean by that, we realized that there are like very different perspectives. And of course, I mean, you were referring also to me, like being kid of diaspora in Germany, working from here in an international context. Yeah, sure, it brings its, let's say, challenges, because like saying multiple narrations can be true also means that my narration isn't the only one. And I mean, in this German context, doing decolonial work, it's always about like, most of the time I spend maybe explaining to others what is my reality. But I think this project is a completely new context where actually I'm the one who is supposed to listen for a while and think about it before coming with a solution or anything. So it's, yeah, I could really feel that that I maybe developed another way of working, thinking, communicating. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for your insights, Jeanne. So lastly, Mutoni. So I believe you're really familiar. Jeanne just mentioned, this this archive work within the decolonial framework, and I believe you run your own project with African Digital Heritage about documenting. So what was a dream you had with a specific joint project, transcontinental project. And I believe this is not the only transcontinental cooperation you've been asked to participate in. As I said, it's becoming a bit of a buzzword. People want to collaborate with practitioners from the continent a lot. So there's a lot of knowledge transfer going on. But what was your dream for this specific digital archive, and what lessons did you take away?
What can I say about talking objects? As I alluded earlier, I'm not the same person who wrote the manifesto. Definitely changed a lot. I think maybe I'll say my biggest takeaway from this process is dreaming in detail, but not too much. I think sometimes we think that tech can offer all the solutions, magical solutions to whatever. We think that tech will make it easier, tech will make it lighter for us, which has been our experience, I guess, with technology, with social media, but I am learning to count the cost that goes behind building this technology and maintaining and sustaining this technology. When I wrote the manifesto and when I was gathering, because the manifesto is gathered from the Talking Objects Labs, from many meetings, so many voices in there, and taking all these voices and attempting to harmonize them. It felt like being a conductor in a choir. Having to listen to what is being said here. Is this being said by this other person? Is this being said by this other person? Okay, that's a theme. So I had big dreams for the archive. Again, thinking that tech could solve, like a digital archive would increase accessibility. We would see ourselves better in this archive. But then what care work goes into building and maintaining the archive? What goes into the actual product? In the manifesto, we say talking objects is both a process and a product. I think for me, my biggest learnings have been within the process, within the limitations of this scope of technology, and expanding my mind in that way that honestly, tech as it isn't gonna solve all our problems magically. There's so much deconstruction that needs to go into how we engage with technology, how we use technology, how we measure the labor and the labor versus the outcome. How do we do all those things? So I think at this point I'm mostly just left with questions inviting me into further interrogation on this question on decolonial technology. What is decolonial technology? Can technology even be decolonial? Is that possible? But as I started, what I will say is this process has taught me to dream in detail. And I'm really proud of us. I'm proud of the work that we've done. I'm very proud of how it's come out, but there's also the part of me that feels a bit of failure. By failure, I mean failure of those grand dreams of what a decolonial archive looks like. That's a playground for imaginations, all of that. So again, as Danielle said, it's trial and error. It's an unfinished process, which we also mentioned in the manifesto. It's not an archive that claims completion. It's unfinished. And yeah, we continue to try. Trying is failing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your honesty, for your openness, for sharing these thoughts. I believe Danielle, you called it failure. Danielle called it unfinished. I think we can all agree on that this conversation needs to continue and that this work needs to continue. So with that being said, I thank you so much, Danielle, Mutoni, Mutanu, Jean, for sharing your experiences and insight. I think this conversation really has shown how collaboration is rooted in, respect, sharing decolonial visions, and can really create something truly transformative. So I think you showed us a powerful example how what can happen when we really, rethink how knowledge is produced and shared. And of course, that comes with trial and error. So thank you so much for being open. And yes, the process will continue. And thank you everyone for watching. Bye-bye. Now we move on to the next part of our program, my favorite Talking Objects archive item. This format highlights the diversity of the archive. Members of the Talking Objects team will not only show you their favorite items, revealing the stories behind these objects, but also the personal perspectives of those who chose them. We have organized these items according to the main categories of the website. Each item reflects a different theme, a different perspective, and a different way of engaging with knowledge. Let's start with the first category, knowledge. In this archive, knowledge is represented without hierarchy, reflecting our commitment to different perspectives. This means you can explore the objects from various angles, opening up new ways of thinking and engaging with them. The archive gathers perspectives on embodied knowledge, situated knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and decolonial discourse, which challenges mainstream Western ways of knowing and understanding the world. Let's now discover some favorite items in this category.
One of my favorite objects from the Talking Objects archive is the Nautilus cup. And in the 17th century, it was the highlight of every aristocratic cabinet of curiosities. It was the pinnacle of craftsmanship and ideological grandiosity. Absurd-looking combinations of materials from the shells of Pacific shellfish with elaborate, intricate gold and silver work and exotic woods in strangely adventurous shapes bore witness to the dominant ideas of wealthy Western European collectors who thought highly of themselves. We collect exciting material from all over the world and even exaggerate its value through our craftsmanship. To what extent does this attitude still shape the state of Europe's relationship with its former colonial territories today? Why can it be interesting for us today to look at a Nautilus cup as more than just a somewhat peculiar object of its time? The Nautilus cup can be used to tell a story about Europe that is still relevant today. The Golden Age has its violent underbelly. Our museums and depots are not only full of looted art from colonial contexts, but also show their colonial traces in the materials of objects considered to be European.
Hello, my name is Selina Baljit Basra. I'm part of the Talking Objects team, and I chose the sac de cotonnage from the archive. It is part of the core collection from the Musée Théodore Monod, and I chose this because bags are close to my heart. The carrier bag theory of fiction by Ursula K. Le Guin is always on my table. I do think that bags are one of the most essential items of cultural history of humankind, being used to carry your essential items. And at first sight, I thought that this bag is something exactly like this, a bag not unlike the one I currently use, a bum bag strapped to my chest with all my essential items, my keys, money, maybe a snack for my daughter, a very small bottle of water, and something that allows me to move easily, to maybe run, something that doesn't weigh me down, doesn't hinder my movements, something that allows me to be flexible and still carry all my essential things with me, close to my heart. But when I looked at the original label from the musée, I found the term chambre de chambre, which signifies more something that is not used as a bag you carry, but as a bag that contains something that protects your home, like a blessing. And as I'm ignorant of the details of the purpose, of the exact charm, of the exact magic it bestows, I can only ask the question, what's in the bag? What's inside? What is the property, the healing agent, the herb, a figurine, maybe also a scent that does protect your home? How does it work? Is it used to protect every home? Is it only used to protect certain homes? So I have a lot of questions for this object, but I was happy to learn that I was wrong about my first idea or interpretation of what it was. And I also like the connection of something that seems so simple, but and is made from simple materials, cotton, but that might actually have and carry a lot of power.
Parlons maintenant de notre prochaine catégorie, la mémoire et l'imaginaire. Comme l'a déclaré la penseuse postcoloniale Nikita Dhawan, l'imaginaire est une pratique forte de changement de mentalité. L'imaginaire devient ici une pratique résistante. Nous posons des questions essentielles. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a en dehors de la domination coloniale? À quoi peut ressembler la liberté? Et aussi, quelles solutions alternatives pouvons-nous proposer aux problèmes d'aujourd'hui? Découvrons maintenant quelques contenus dans la catégorie mémoire et l'imaginaire.
One of my favorite items from the Talking Objects archive is a conversation between the prolific historian, artist and thinker Felwine Sarr and Magnus Elias Rosengarten, where they speak about the themes of historical traces of colonial violence, the transformative power of archives, sites of archives, and really ways of being in relation to what we consider archives, memory, and identity. They explore how decolonial perspectives can shift how we view these core aspects of who we are and who we were, really focusing on the ways in which asymmetrical power dynamics can change our relationships to our identities and ourselves. I was particularly drawn to Felwin's reflection around how we should widen the archive of knowledge. You know, how do we expand our definition of what an archive is and where an archive is? Where are archives embodied? Where are they created? Where are they stored? And this includes really exploring the body as a site of knowledge, looking at dance, looking at music, and ways of being as ways in which we remember and ways in which we transmit knowledge from one generation to another. So here's Felwine in a brief excerpt speaking about this.
Dance, for example, dance is a way of knowing and relating to reality, and the body knows much more than the brain. And if we try to widen the archive of knowledge, we can explore the bodies as sites of knowledge, of different type of knowledge.
I think it's especially important the ways in which Felwine brings to our attention the fact that archives change our realities, and therefore expanding the site of an archive, expanding the definition of an archive, is also expanding the possibilities of the realities that we create and inhabit.
Hello, everyone. I am here to show you or talk with you about my favorite object. I cannot really say it's my favorite, but it really, this mask spoke to me in so many tongues. I chose the dance crest, and I will try to give several reasons that you can understand, but mainly the crest was really just talking to me. Yeah, as I said, it speaks in so many tongues in so many ways. It seems like on the one side, like so powerful, yet very dramatic. Dramatic by its features, but also by the whole figure itself, like it is a head standing. Questions that initially came to me were like, how would you use it? To whom is it referred to? I can imagine that they observe what you do and how you do it. I mean, look at the eyes; they look pretty judgy to me. It seems not uncommon that the open mouth reveals those large teeth, intensively staring with their white eyes, but not really at their counterpart, like more intentionally away from that. The garments on the nose and also the pretty graphic features, physical features, noted in the high arched brows and also particularly in the raised curved lines around the eyes that look for me like really thick veins, almost alive. They really lured me in while looking for my favorite object. The hairstyle, which is like taking almost like 2/3 of the whole body, looks like twisted ropes. That was at least my first association, directing in three different directions. And I'm not sure if the directions really indicate something, but I do have the feeling that they're intentive. And I do have the feeling that this crest represents like certain codes of behavior in this way, because it shows like different like possibilities of how to behave, and then also the staring eyes, and yeah, their thick hair also implying for me not only authority but specifically physical strength, indicated by the straining of the lines around the hair and the neck and the head. What I also found very interesting is that it seems like the person that they are referred to, they're having a dialogue with, can only be someone of power, of authority, someone who is able to guide ways, to make paths, be a figure for others. Not only because of their physical appearance, but especially because of their inner strength. And I feel like by dancing around them while they're standing, or by dancing or moving while having them in your hand, they enforce the power of the community, the meaning they have for the people they are a guidance to, or guidance for. I did not really think about it like I don't have like clear visual images there, but I do have like a feeling of what kind of relationship you would have while performing or while dancing with them. And it's really like repeating what they already guide you. Showing like, when I was talking about those codes of behavior, they're enforcing you to repeat them and to show them for the people that you are guiding. And they're kind of like really helping to enforce those codes, those behaviors, and that you actually able to be that that guidance to bring out this power and authority.
The next category is called restitution and reclamation. For many years, the question of restitution, the return of objects that were plundered during colonial rule, has been the focus of intense debates. However, beyond the political discussions around restitution, there are important questions to ask. What happens to these objects when they are returned? What stories do they carry and how do they speak to us today? How can they be reintegrated into their communities and cultural contexts? Restitution is not only about returning what was taken. It is about recognizing the value of these objects as living carriers of memory, knowledge, and identity. Let us now explore some favorite items in the restitution and reclamation category.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mutanu Chania. I'm the head of programs and outreach at African Digital Heritage. My favorite object is a knowledge item, a film by Ariela Aisha Azole. It's titled Undocumented, Unlearning Imperial Plunder. I love the film for several reasons. First, it provides an intimate view of objects housed in museums in imperial states. For many of us living in regions where securing a visa to visit these places is not only a dehumanizing and expensive process, but often an unattainable one, this film offers an up-close introduction to objects that are supposed to be repositories of our identities. This raises a critical question. How can objects that represent a people's identity be celebrated and welcome while the people themselves remain unwanted? Talking Objects Archive is our attempt to expand the scope of and accessibility of these objects, reaching those who may not have access to these museums. The film also exposes the violence, deception, and manipulation behind the acquisition of these objects and how their identities were stripped away. As a result, the objects appear soulless, exhausted, in pain, and longing for home. Azole invites us to question museum practices around the visual representation of these objects and explores what it could mean to include source communities in the display and curation process. In the Talking Objects Archive, we attempt to breathe life back into these objects, inviting contributors to provide deeper context and reconnect them to their original communities, and thus connect them back home. However, Azole also urges us to examine the labor involved in decolonial efforts. She argues that the empire exploited the kindness of native people to acquire these objects, making them inaccessible to the very communities that created them. Thus, we must not only question the labor involved in challenging the dislocation of these objects from their source communities, but also the labor expected from these same communities to add knowledges to them. Azole suggests that decolonial efforts could either be the beginning of reparations or simply a continuation of imperial institutions benefiting from the cheap labor and memories of others. I welcome you to engage with the Talking Objects Archive and raise questions just the same as Azole, and engage with us. Looking forward to seeing your engagements.
Hello. My favorite Talking Objects Archive item is a recording of a performance. The name of the performance is Bemi, which is Yoruba and translates as Carry Me. The performance or the performer, the name of the performer is Tululupe Ami Williams, and she is inviting members of the audience to take part in a cleansing. So one by one, she brings one person in the audience to the stage, to the center, and they start cleaning two figures together. And they're doing that with their bare hands and with some water. And that's actually also what I like about this performance. I like the fact that it's like a very modest gesture of cleansing. Also, I was thinking about the way Tululupe is dressed. You can see her in all white. Even her face is covered with a white net. And to me, it seems like maybe Tululupe takes the role of somebody who's building bridges, like putting herself maybe a little bit in the back, and is the bridge builder in this sense. By connecting the audience with the objects. And that's another thing that I really like. And since this performance falls under the category of restitution or reclamation, I was, of course, also thinking about what we maybe know or what kind of images come into our head when we think about those moments of object return. And one has to know that this performance took place in Lagos 1 year after Germany and Nigeria signed a contract on the restitution of several African artifacts. So yeah, I was also thinking about time and place. Where did this performance took place? And having all this in the back of my mind, I have to say that I like this performance even more, and it makes it even more powerful, because this performance is one that centers healing, that centers community building and care. So to me, it seems maybe this performance is saying, I know at other places they're maybe having fancy celebrations, but this is a space of quietness, of slowness, and a space where we can actually engage with the objects by literally feeling and touching and cleansing them. So yeah, that's why I really like this performance, and I will show some few seconds of this recording.
I cannot undo the deed that has been done. So I choose to undo the conditions under which they were done. I pour back fresh water into the well from which I drank from my memories to be erased. I choose to love. I seek to know. To protect. To cleanse. To forgive. To forget. Not to forget the lost years of wandering and forceful interactions in unknown and unfamiliar destinations. But to forget the imposed labels and decorative confinements that forced my body to sever ties with my soul and spirit. I forge new memories by binding body, soul, and spirit together with pieces of the very shackles that kept us apart. I only ask one thing. That you take care of me. And if you must go away from me. Carry me not just as far as your eyes can travel. Of my rebirth. But that you carry the truth of my rebirth in your thoughts, words, and deeds. I cannot undo the deed that has been done. So I choose to undo the conditions under which they were done. I pour back fresh water into the well.
Parlons maintenant de la prochaine catégorie qui s'appelle identité. La multidimensionnalité des identités africaines est au cœur de la question de la décolonisation. En s'appuyant sur la théorie décoloniale de la féministe et intellectuelle Sylvia Tamale, nous voyons la décolonisation comme un double processus. La déconstruction des identités imposées par l'Occident et la construction de nos propres identités définies par nous-mêmes. Explorons maintenant quelques contenus préférés dans la catégorie identité.
Je m'appelle Isabelle. Mon favorite Talking Objects Archive item, c'est un instrument de musique qui s'appelle le lalade. Voilà. C'est un instrument traditionnel qui fait partie de la communauté des Pula Fouta dans le sud du Sénégal. Nous avons invité Talatiam à se rendre à Tambacounda, au sud du Sénégal, pour faire des portraits des instruments traditionnels chez les communautés. Elle a réalisé des vidéos, des interviews, elle a enregistré des audios. Et c'est ainsi qu'est née une collection unique que l'on trouve que dans le Talking Objects Archive. Le laladé m'a impressionné tant par son aspect visuel que par son son. Le bâton est en bois, les rondelles sont en calebasse décortiquée. Il n'est joué que pour les fêtes comme les mariages ou les baptêmes. Je voudrais montrer un extrait de l'interview que Tala a réalisé avec un joueur de lalada, à la fin duquel on peut entendre la musique de l'instrument.
ko cari mi jangi o laalaɗe o Allah waɗi mi jangi ko cari laalaɗe o ko addi o laala ko addi o ko cosane pullo Fuuta si mi yehino aynugol nayi mi naɓay kurum mi soppa o ko kenkeliba ko kenkeliba mi soppata mi waɗa yiite mi huɓɓa mi waɗa leggal o ni mi waɗa ni ha o waɗa ni mi ƴetta o horde mi hetta mi tufa mo mi waɗa ɗo ko bit ɗo ko bit ko ɗum woni keltir cosane mum tigi ko Fuuta Jallo ko boowe waɗi sakiti joni sa yeehi Dingirawi a yiyay sa yeehi Sénégal a yiyay kono ko boowe woni cosane mum ko fulɓe nayi aynoɓe nayi waɗayno ɗum ha ɓe wona artiste ɓe wona yimugol banta o nami haalanima ko kenkeliba leggal ngal kenkeliba o ko kore settete tufe poore o ko poore min ƴettata min firta min haɓɓa ha min gayna pour si waɗta waɗi o yanata meɗe jogui façon tati min neeɓa ɓooya min yaawa seeɗa pour wawi yaadude e kalam o e filliteji ɗi après min yaawa kadi après si ammo wonati min yaawa pour no amira ɗin ɗon tati miɗen jogui ɗum o no jogui ɗum yaw
Hello, my name is Jasmine, and I would like to share one of my favorite items from the Talking Objects archive. These child shoes, they are from the collection of the Museum for European Cultures in Berlin, and it is known that they originated from Serbia, as also indicated by the tag on one of the shoes. We also know that these shoes are made from different colored leather. And they caught my attention because I'm interested by the ways children and also young people leave their traces in history. Shoes in particular, they feel for me as if they are very personal objects. They are directly connected to my feet, to my movement, and to my journey. And my question to this pair of shoes would be, what movements have you experienced? Which journey or which paths have you walked on? And these shoes, while clearly worn, they show little sign of extensive use, as the sole is still in very good condition. What I love most about them is, of course, the beautiful detailing at the top, the white, blue, and green accents on the red leather. And if you scroll down on the page, you will see that this is not the only pair of children's shoes which are in the collection of the Talking Objects Archive. There's also another pair. It's from the collection of the Musée Théodore Monod. And yeah, you can see them being connected in the section of the curated items at the bottom of the page.
We would now like to introduce you to an exciting innovation within the Talking Objects Archive, the Experimental Video Archive, or EVA. EVA is a brand new tool that makes it possible to annotate videos and enrich them with knowledge and information. Developed as a part of the Talking Objects project, EVA opens up possibilities to rethink how we engage with knowledge in a digital space. Erik Stein and Robin Köhnen, the developers of EVA, will now present this brand new prototype to us. Let's take a look.
Hello everyone. Let's start with a question. What is a digital archive, a digital catalog, or a database? And why do we need to think of these software systems in a more inclusive and transformative way? In this project, we are building a digital database and its visual representation for an archive of plural knowledge production. But what does that mean? It's about creating an archive that carries knowledge from many perspectives and stores it in diverse forms of thought and imagination. An archive that stays accessible to many for the long term. Traditional archives often center around objects, treating them as static things, artifacts to categorize and own. But when we designed the experimental video archive, we believed that knowledge doesn't just sit in the object. It lives in the stories around it, in the connections, relationships, and practices tied to it. Videos are powerful. They let objects move and tell their stories. A camera can show details of an artifact, capture performances, move, zoom in, zoom out, or document historical context. But a raw video is just a file. It's only meaningful when we add knowledge to it. That's where annotations come in. In the experimental video archive, annotations turn video into knowledge. You can add transcriptions, translations, narratives, even fiction, references, or critical reflections. These layers make connections visible. They turn our archive into a living catalog of knowledge, not just a collection of things. To bring this to life and to bring this to the users, we are creating an interactive platform. Here's what it does. The videos are enriched, as explained earlier, with annotations from multiple authors. The annotations themselves become searchable, combinable, and therefore become objects on their own. You can explore the videos and the annotations in different view modes, visually through a diagrammatical view, entangled, where the knowledge is embedded in the video, only experienceable when you watch the video, or as an overview or as a notepad, where you can watch the video on one side and scroll through the knowledge annotations on the other side. The experimental video archive is not just meant as a software, it's a practice, a way of working that centers relationships, stories, and multiple perspectives. It's about making inclusive knowledge not just something we preserve, but something we live with and share.
Pour conclure ce programme, nous sommes très heureux de partager avec vous une œuvre vidéo de l'artiste et de la chercheuse Gladys Kalichini. Gladys est presque devenue un membre de la famille Talking Objects et cette vidéo a été présentée lors de nombreux événements organisés par le projet. Elle traite de thèmes essentiels, la guérison, le partage des connaissances et le caring. À travers cette œuvre, Gladys nous invite à réfléchir aux notions d'effacement, de mémoire et à la représentation des femmes. Regardons ensemble, ces pratiques sont faites pour partager ces histoires. Ce lancement touche à sa fin, mais ce n'est que le début. Les archives numériques sont vivantes et évoluent avec le temps. C'est pour cette raison que nous vous invitons de bien découvrir le site, mais aussi d'y contribuer. Partagez avec nous vos récits, vos objets et vos savoirs. Merci beaucoup d'avoir célébré ce moment avec nous et à très bientôt.